Good morning, Mr. Mybeck. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, DCJ.
Are you ready?
Yes, we are, thank you.
Yes.
DCJ, today we're going to start with the evidence of Mr. Gama. He is here. You will find Mr. Gama's exhibit in bundle 7. It's exhibit BB28.
Yes.
Mr. Gama has thus far filed 2 affidavits, which we obviously ask you to admit into evidence when he's sworn in. But perhaps I could just say this by way of background, if I may. You are aware, Chairperson, that the parties have reached an agreement to the effect that we will effectively ring-fence evidence in relation to locomotives. And I suppose it's important for me to explain that when we talk about evidence and locomotives, we're talking about the acquisition of locomotives as well as any transactional advice and agreement and also relocation. So effectively, we won't deal with anything dealing with locomotives today. The agreement is that Mr. Gama, we've provided him with what we consider to be the relevant parts of the Fundutsi report, which we've invited him to deal with. The agreement is that an affidavit will be put in by next week Friday, as I understand. So it is our intention today to deal with 4 main topics outside of the locomotives. The first relates to Mr. Gama's reinstatement. The second relates to GNS/Abelozi. The third relates to alleged assistance provided by Mr. Sagar of McKinsey to Mr. Gama in respect of the completion of his MBA. And then fourthly, it had been our intention to deal with driver 2. But I understand there may be some issues from Mr. Gama's side. I'll discuss that with my learned friend over the tea break. Hopefully we can come to some assistance or arrangement. Apparently, it's alleged that there's still some information outstanding, and apparently Mr. Gama wants to cross-examine driver number 2. So that might have to be put on hold as well. But certainly we can, at least today, deal with reinstatement, GNS, and Mr. Sagar. The benefit of that as well is that after our examination of Mr. Gama and any re-examination, I guess that we'll all be in a position then to deal insofar as Mr. Gama persists with the application to cross-examine Mr. Todd. That should be something that could be determined quite easily in the light of our examination of Mr. Gama.
Well, I would imagine that any re-examination would have to happen when he has completed all his evidence on everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, as you are aware, Mr. Gama, as you know, is represented by counsel. He's here if you'd like him to place himself on record.
Yes. You may do so from where you are if your mic is working.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chair, Old Wage, KC, Johannesburg Bar, Brian Khan Incorporated, my attorneys.
Yes.
And it's a matter of record that I have been representing Mr. Gama from the outset. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. You're ready.
Yes, we are.
Good morning, Mr. Gama.
Good morning, TCJ. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Good. Please administer the oath of affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
Siyabonga Gama.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
I'm not sure whether the transcribers would have had Mr. Gama's responses. Let's double check. We might have to repeat if we must do it again. Okay, I'm sorry. Just speak up a bit so they can hear and it can be recorded.
Please state your full names for the record.
Siyabonga Innocent Gama.
Do you have any
Okay, no, I'm not, I don't think that's up, that's loud enough. So try again,
Okay, try and speak
maybe
to the
closer
mic.
to the mic, yeah.
Siyabonga Innocent Gama.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. You may sit down. Okay. Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Maybeck.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gama, the protocol is I'm just going to take you to your affidavits and get them entered as exhibits. I know that you wish to make an opening address. You're more than welcome to do that. Let's just enter your affidavits formally. And then,
If he would like to make an opening address, I would prefer that I see what he's going to say first, because I allowed Mr. Brian Mlefe to make an opening address without seeing his statement, and it implicated certain people. Sure. So I would like that you see it, I see it first.
all right.
So that we are just sure that it doesn't implicate anybody, because if it does, they should procedurally first be served with three notices.
It is, this is something we've raised with our learned friends. Mr. Chairperson, perhaps can I suggest then that what we do is we get Mr. Gama's affidavits entered, and then we perhaps have a short adjournment where we can be provided with a copy of Mr. Gama's opening address, and we can then read it and then reconvene. Or would you like to rather see the opening address now?
Well, no, I think we can do it the way you are suggesting. It may be called an opening address, but it may be that whether he makes it now or some time later might not make a difference. But of course, he or his counsel will indicate whether it makes a lot of difference, or as long as he gets a chance at some stage to make it. But certainly, we can have his affidavit submitted.
Yes.
And then maybe take a short adjournment. We look at it. It may be that if it doesn't implicate anybody, he can then go ahead
Yes,
and make it. If it does implicate somebody, it may be that it might have to wait, and other arrangements might be made for another time. Ms. Aldridge, do you want to say anything in this regard, or not really?
Mr. Chair, I'm fully, respectfully in agreement with the proposed way forward. Thank you.
Yes, okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gama, you have Bundle 7, Exhibit 22 in front of you.
Mr. Maybeck, maybe pull your mic a little too, yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Gama, I think it's the file in front of you. Bundle 7, Exhibit 28.
Yeah, you look on this, you look at the spine of the file to see which bundle it is, and then you can go inside the file to look at the actual exhibit.
Could I ask you, please, to turn to page 7? And there you will find an affidavit, and it starts at page 7.
I'm sorry. It's bundle 7, eh?
Bundle 7, Exhibit 28.
Where do I find exhibit 28? What page?
Is it not the first part of the file, DCJ?
Or is it after BP 24? No, that is Gigaba. Is the pagination of the bundle not sequential? Because if you tell me the page
Well,
number...
What I have is Exhibit 28, that is then paginated by itself.
Oh, okay. Let me try and look for it. The best is,
DCJ, do you have bundle 7?
sorry?
Do you have bundle 7?
Yes, that's the one I have.
Well, bundle 7 has got a tab in the front that says BB28.
I have got, I've now reached Mr. Gama's affidavit, which appears on page 116. 116, Mr. Gama, would be the black 116 at the top left of the page. Disregard for now the red numbers on the right-hand corner, unless you are specifically asked to use it.
DCJ, I'm afraid that for some reason our documents are different.
Yes,
Perhaps I could.
Mine
Perhaps,
is the same as that, DCJ.
I don't know how come your one is different from mine, Mr. Maybeck. They should be the same.
may I?
The one that I have in front of me, Mr. Gama's affidavit, is one deposed to on the 31st of August, 2020.
Yes.
No, of January, 31st January 2021. Is that the one you were
No.
referring to? No.
DCJ, may I perhaps suggest that we take a
take
short
the
adjournment so I can
yeah.
sort that out and we can try and deal with the statement issue.
Yeah.
I'll
okay,
speak to
let's-
your
let's-
registrar.
Let's do that because it's going to cause problems if we don't have the same things. Okay, we adjourn. I realized that Mr. Gama's opening statement was much longer than I had anticipated, and going through it would take quite some time. So that's why I sent the message that we will have to start, and I would have to read it some other time. Having said that, I do realize that there may be certain portions or certain topics that he deals with that maybe might not create any problem. So one option is that if there is agreement about certain portions that do not implicate anybody, that he could deal with those and leave out for now those that may implicate other people for later, or he could make the whole statement at a later time when we have all had a look. But I've seen that there are portions that may implicate certain people, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, Mr. Mybeck, what are you able to say?
Chairperson, we have identified, I think, 3 or 4 points that may certainly be problematic.
Yes.
From our side, I mean, the real introductory stuff about the purpose of the statement, if Mr. Gama wishes to complain about how he's been treated by the Transnet stream, we don't have any difficulty with him dealing with that. The scope of the investigation, his motivation to join Transnet, his achievements at Transnet. So really, up until page 6, we don't have a difficulty, and that would probably fall typically within an opening statement. But then he deals with the various witnesses. It seems to me also there, I suppose, potential problem is that's really evidence. And along the way, he does say some things that may implicate people outside of the ordinary sort of course of the argy-bargy of litigation.
Yes.
So, I mean, one possibility is that Mr. Gama be afforded an opportunity of perhaps just paring this down, and then we could go through the rest of it.
Well, in the course of his evidence, insofar as he is, so far as he may deal with the evidence of certain witnesses, obviously that's fine, but one assumes that he would deal with those within the context of his affidavit, which, if they implicate those people, would have been served on those people. But I don't know whether what he says here is confined to what is in his affidavits about those witnesses, or whether it might be going beyond that.
Well, we have identified 2 or 3 occasions where we think he is going beyond that.
Yeah.
I mean, another possibility, if I could suggest this, we are confining ourselves today to reinstatement GNS, Abelozi, Mr. Cigar, and Driver 2. Driver 2 may have to be put on hold. The reinstatement and GNS topics effectively deals with Mr. Todd's evidence. Perhaps if Mr. Gama can deal with the introductory material in his opening statement and then deal with whatever he wants to say about Mr. Todd, that may be relevant to the examination that we're going to undertake today, Chairperson, and then we can see if we can deal with the other things on the next occasion.
Yeah. Let me hear what Mr. Gama's counsel has to say.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm somewhat in agreement, albeit not fully in agreement with what is been proposed by Mr. Myberg, I do believe that the purpose of the statement as an introductory topic to this opening statement is important. There is, and I want to say this at the outset, when there is mention made in the opening statement of the prejudice that my client has suffered, it is as a consequence of the non-provision of information and documentation by the legal team. It should not be in any way interpreted that it is aimed at you, Mr. Chair. None whatsoever, and I emphasize that point. His discontent flows over into, for instance, the aspect concerning witness number 2. My client's approach to the matter is that he's indicated that he wishes to cross-examine, but he wants certain information.
Okay.
So it flows over. So to compartmentalize, as it were, certain aspects of the statement is difficult. But I do believe, and I don't wish to speak on his behalf, he's given me the nod thus far, and if he's not in agreement with me from where he is, he will indicate to me. But I do believe what is important is that we deal with that second paragraph. And it's also important in the context of the evidence that has been given with reference to his performance, and in particular, certain matters such as reinstatement, and in fact, the fact that he'd been identified as being a candidate for the position of Group Chief Executive Officer of Transnet. It's important to have regard to one particular thing, and that is his achievements within Transnet.
Yeah.
And specifically how he came through the ranks.
Yes.
It's not as though he parachuted in,
Yeah.
like some others did.
The achievements are quite in order because he doesn't implicate anybody in any wrongdoing in regard to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
Might I make this final submission on
Yes.
that score of matters?
Yes.
The position is, I'm not entirely sure that there is merit to a finding that is implicated in the context of state capture others. What my client does say is that in relation to evidence that is served before you, he's not satisfied that in all material respects it's accurate, correct, and truthful.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's the gist of his complaint.
Yes, that's fine. I think what we should do, and I think we are all agreed, at least on this, and I say all because so far I take, Mr. Gama, I take your counsel to be representing you, but I will give you a chance to say something. I think Mr. Myberg is probably correct that maybe the first 5.5 pages could don't seem to implicate anybody in anything. Now, I haven't read the statement, so I don't know whether the statement you make is correct, but maybe if he is able to cover the first 5.5 pages to address, to deal with those, insofar as the rest of his statement may appear to be his response to certain witnesses, maybe we should say, if and when, I mean, a lot of those witnesses, I think, won't feature in today's evidence because of the scope that has been agreed. When he comes back, it may be that everything will have been cleared for him then to make, to deal with the rest of his opening statement. That's what I'm thinking. So in the end, he will get a chance to deal with them. It's a question of when, and also the procedure. I think we would be largely in agreement with that.
Can I add, Chairperson?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Gama, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just want to add, Chairperson, I have not spoken here about anybody who has not already spoken about me.
Yes.
So there are no new
Yes,
There are no new names. And also, Chairperson,
yeah,
when one provides context
Yeah.
to something that someone said,
yeah.
I'm not implicating them.
Yeah.
I am
But
correcting.
remember that I haven't read it.
Yes, but I'm just telling you,
Yes.
Chairperson, what is in here. Perhaps the elegant way to deal with it would be to do those things that we've agreed that we should do.
Yes,
But also, I think as council indicates, to go further and talk a little bit about the other issues beyond page 6, about the topics that we'll be discussing here today.
yes,
And then at a later date, I can then come back
yes,
to the other issues. But here, I'm not implicating people. I am giving context
yeah,
to the untruths that I think have been visited upon me.
yes. No. But as I understand you have no quarrel with the proposition that insofar as you seek to respond to certain witnesses, that can be done later. Yeah. Okay, all right.
So put another way, DCJ, what I would be comfortable with
Yeah.
is obviously the introductory material must
Yeah.
be dealt with, as you said, the first
Yes.
5.5 pages. And then,
Yes.
as I've mentioned,
Yeah,
we're going to deal principally with Mr. Gama's reinstatement in GNS, and that relates to the evidence of Mr. Todd.
yeah,
Mr. Gama does, at page 10, paragraph 8.3, deal with Mr. Todd's testimony and statement. If he wishes to deal with that, obviously subject to your direction, we would have no difficulty with it, because it then deals with the evidence we're about to traverse now.
So after page 6, you say he deals with Mr. Todd's evidence from page 10,
At paragraph 8.3,
and that goes up to when?
I think it's just that series of
Or
subparagraphs.
just those 8.3?
Mr. Gama will correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong. But if he refers to Mr. Todd anywhere else, we would have no difficulty with him
Yeah,
dealing with
Okay,
that.
okay, that's fine. Let's do it that way then.
Mr. Chair, just one final request from me,
Yes.
if you'll permit me.
Yes,
I'll
yes.
also request that my client be permitted to read out into the record from page 14, which is the page that incorporates his conclusion in the matter, if he'll be permitted to read that into the record as
Okay,
well.
okay.
It's
Yes,
not a long-
I think when I just glance at it, it looks like there should be no problem with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Mr. Mybeck, I don't see, doesn't look like there should be a problem with that.
Just glancing at it briefly, no,
Yes.
Chairperson.
Yes. Yeah, no. So basically then, it's from the beginning of your statement, Mr. Gama, up to paragraph 7.9.9 at page 6, and then you can skip up to, go to page 10, paragraph 8.3, dealing with Mr. Todd. If there is anything else relating to Mr. Todd elsewhere, you can include it, but otherwise you then skip to your conclusion. And then at a later date, you will be able to cover what we are not able to allow you to cover today. Is that all right? Okay, all right. I give you the chance to do that now. Just switch on your mic, and you can keep it on throughout.
Chairperson, thank you very much for the opportunity to deal with those aspects. I hope it's not censure, but it's just to give
It's just a matter of time.
context to those because of time. Chairperson, I'd like to take the opportunity, therefore, to just thank you for for allowing me to make this opening address. First, I'd like to address the aspect of the prejudice that is suffered by me at the hands of the Commission's legal team. Aspects relating to me being called to provide evidence. I'll speak a little bit about why I joined Transnet, my history, and then I'll talk, as we have agreed, we'll ring fence, I'll talk a little bit about one of the witnesses. Chair, various testimonies have been provided by witnesses in this commission who have sought to implicate me. But what I want to do is I want to highlight some of the glaring discrepancies, some of the inconsistencies in their testimonies, some of the improbabilities, and some of the falsities that relate to. But first, I start with the Commission's legal team. The Commission has been tasked with the responsibility to interrogate matters in its search for the truth. However, the legal teams assert that they would not merely presume a particular set of facts. Witnesses may give different, even contradictory versions in relation to a particular factual allegation or set of facts. It is therefore the function of the Commission and yourself, Chairperson, the Commissioner, to consider all the relevant material and any and all versions in search for the truth. I would like to address the Commission on the issue of the prejudice which I suffered at the hands of the legal team since May 2019 up to the present day, although in recent days things have improved dramatically. When I first addressed and engaged the Commission in May 2019 is when I received my second Rule 33 notice. I set out the failure of the legal team in terms of adequately informing me as a witness in terms of what I needed to do to testify at the Commission, and also in implicating me in conduct which allegedly forms part of state capture. The failure to provide me with sufficient notice severely prejudiced me, as I was often caught unaware that such allegations were being leveled against me. Sometimes I would wake up and turn on the television and there's somebody who was speaking about me, and I don't even have the Rule 33 notice. Sometimes I get it 2 weeks later. Sometimes I don't get it at all. So, by way of example, maybe I should just skip that in the interest of time, but shortly after the second Rule 33 notice was served on me, my attorneys have been engaging and in constant communication with the Commission and the evidence leaders concerning the witness statements and the documents referred to in such statements. Between May 2019 and September 2020, we got one standard answer from the Commission. We acknowledge receipt of your communication. Our legal team will look at it. And that's it. And there was never any follow-up as a result of that. By engaging with the Commission at every turn, whenever there were witnesses, I demonstrated my willingness to participate in the inquiry, with the clear proviso that I required to be provided with the documents referred to by the witnesses timelessly in order to be able to test or challenge their versions if and when necessary, and to exercise my rights in terms of inter alia Rule 3.4 of the rules. The Commission has at all relevant times been aware of the fact that I take the allegations against me seriously and do not appreciate being ambushed by the tactics that have been quite evidently been employed by the evidence leaders tasked with allegations concerning Transnet and myself. One such example is the late provision of certain reports which have been read into the record. Numerous requests by my attorneys of record for important and relevant documents, including witness statements, affidavits, and transcripts, have gone unanswered, as I've indicated. Now, it is regrettable, Chair, that the Commission Secretariat or legal teams have conducted themselves in a way where you find that the provision of matter that is sought from the Commission, for instance, the request for copies of my diary during my tenure at Transnet, I've asked for it since September 2020. It can't be difficult to find a diary. It can be difficult to find certain minutes of meetings that I've indicated took place at Transnet, and I've given dates to say these meetings took place on these dates. In the minutes, there is this document. It can't be too difficult. So I still have not received copies of my diary, despite my attorneys requesting this on numerous occasions. We've been given something like meeting requests, which is of no use to me to deal with it, and being told that, no, that is the only thing that we have, which is an aspect of your diary. I do believe, Chair, that in the ordinary course, such diary is stored somewhere within the records of Transnet. It must exist. On 21st of October 2018, the Commission served the first Regulation 33 notice in relation to me, which was by a statement by Barbara Hogan. It served to inform me that I had possibly been implicated by the evidence of Hogan and that I was entitled to attend the hearing of her evidence, which would be presented. This was the first time that I'd engaged with the Commission. Following on from that first notice, as I've indicated, it went quiet until 24 April 2019, when I received that second rule, Regulation 33 that I've just discussed. The notices came with a huge body of documentation, and almost all instances there was also outstanding documentation, a lot of it, which was requested by me and my legal team on numerous occasions. And as I've indicated, the information was just not forthcoming. There's been information, for instance, where I've asked the Commission that I saw my name being mentioned, that there were certain vaults somewhere in Houghton, and that I was an owner of a vault. And I've asked for information from the Commission relating to that. All I get is that the legal team is going to come back to me about it. But these are serious allegations that are being leveled against you when you know of no such, but your name gets dragged and tainted into those things. Chairperson, in November 2020, I've received my second Regulation 10.6 notice, which called upon me to provide an answer within 21 days to deal with the testimony of Siyabonga Gama and Christopher Todd. That testimony in respect of Regulation 10.6 sought to implicate me in misconduct and fraud. I deny any and all allegations, Chairperson, of misconduct, and as it relates to state capture in the strongest terms. Ultimately, on 8 February 2021, I received the summons to attend the Commission in order to provide evidence and to be questioned regarding my affidavits of 29 and 31st of January, respectively, and to answer to approximately 20 matters under investigation, ranging from Transnet's acquisitions of locomotives to international trips, which apparently coincided with trips of the Gupta family. Chairperson, I just want to share with you why I decided to join a state-owned entity, and particularly Transnet, in 1994, after having had a promising career in banking, which included a stint in Wall Street in New York. At the dawn of our democracy, Chair, I was convinced that it was my duty to contribute what business skills I had to the growth and development of a new country, an opportunity which I believe is not afforded to many people. So addressing the national question from a perspective of creating a moderately prosperous nation has always been my guiding objective. The concept of helping to build a new country, therefore, was an exciting proposition post the success of the first democratically held elections in our country. At the heart of this excitement on my part was the possibility to contribute to the accelerated dismantling of the immoral apartheid system. And two, to create a new society where redress and the redistribution of wealth would help to bring about many previously marginalized people, especially Black people and women, to the mainframe of the economy, moving them from the periphery to the center. I was convinced that Transnet had the capability to contribute substantially to a sustainable developmental state. I believed, as I still do, that SOEs can make a contribution towards moving the masses of our people from the periphery to the center. The majority, who are largely participants in the second economy of have-nots, have the possibility to be assisted to move towards the first economy through deployment of state resources in a targeted, orderly, and considered way. Training, skills development, the promotion of supplier development hubs are at the forefront of a national initiative to improve the productive capacity of our country. In all my dealings, Chair, I have practiced principles of fairness, principles of ethical leadership, and I have played pivotal roles in the redress of the gross inequality in our country, and especially as it relates to youth employment and business opportunities. Those who have worked with me will attest to the positive energy that I have brought into the workplace to inspire young people to strive for excellence through believing in oneself in order for them to succeed. So I could never stand by and ignore the immorality of the concentration of our economy on a few elites. Our country, Chairperson, needs to continue the conversation of how more people can participate in the economy, especially strategies to address youth unemployment and to give hope to those who have never enjoyed the dividend of a stable democracy. We must continue the conversation of how we can unite our divided country by addressing the national question. You will, I'm sure, Mr. Chairman, agree, Chairperson, that the goal of a united nation living prosperously under a constitutional democracy remains a dream. I now turn briefly, and indeed not exhaustively, to deal with my achievements that I attained during my tenure at Transnet. My career in Transnet started in 1994, Mr. Chair. There are some who would want you to believe that it started when Minister Gigaba assumed the position of Minister of Public Enterprises. It's not true. I've worked as a senior executive at Transnet under various ministers, including the late Minister Stella Stow, Minister Jeff Kadebe, Minister Alec Ewin, Minister Bridget Mabandla, and Hogan, prior to Gigaba's appointment. Chairperson, during this time, I worked as a senior executive under many chief executives, and also I worked as a chief executive myself of various divisions within Transnet. But also there were group executives such as Saki Makozom, Mafiga Mkwanas, Maria Ramos, and lastly, Brian Molife, that I served. When I was appointed as the chief executive of Spornet, which is the largest division of Transnet, I was specifically approached by the then group chief executive, Maria Ramos, in 2005, to intervene and apply my skills and expertise to affect a turnaround to Spornet. I welcomed the opportunity because it was part of my dream unfolding. In the year that I joined Spornet, they had made a loss of 100 million, despite a turnover of some 13 billion rand at the end of March. And to me, it was a travesty that you could have such a huge turnover and not make money. not make a profit. And it was one of the things that I declared to everybody that we will not make a profit again. So from that day onwards, we worked hard, 16 to 18 hours a day, to make sure that we turn around that business. The following year, let me just say that during the preceding period, the 5-year period before I went to Sportnet, I had been running the Port Authority division of Transnet, which was the largest contributor to profitability in the Transnet Group. During 2007, which was 2 years after I had been appointed as Sportnet, the division was renamed Transnet Freight Rail, TFR. It also became the largest contributor to the profits of Transnet in 2008, which was 3 years after I had joined. So under my stewardship, TFR overtook the Port Authority division and became the leading division at Transnet in terms of profitability. I have documented some of the successes that I and my team managed to bring to the railways by 2008. The success can be attributed, Chairperson, to our proper understanding of Transnet's operations, which we documented and which contributed to a sustainable overall performance of the group. If I were to highlight a few other milestones and achievements that I obtained during my tenure at Transnet, it would be noted that Transnet became the first ever SOE to be accredited and certified as a top employer by the Top Employers Institute. TFR won the Best African Railway Operator Awards for 2 years running between 2011 and 2012. I was the National Business Leader of the Year in 2008. I was also the Young Business Leader of the Year in 2004, which is awards that are awarded by the National Business Awards. At TFR, in conjunction with the Glasgow Caledonian University and the University of Johannesburg, we spearheaded and introduced the first ever university-accredited railway qualification in operations management, up to master's level. We launched the first ever Chief Executive Talent Nurturing Program for future leaders. And we prided ourselves in achieving year-on-year growth in revenue and profit, always far above CPI. We won various logistics national awards and even international accolades for the longest trains, 375 wagon manganese trains as an example. I have been inducted, Chairperson, to the Global Hall of Fame for my contribution to work in the maritime sector. I have also held positions as the president of both the Pan-African Ports Association between 2003 and 2004, which is the continental association of all ports in Africa. I was also the president of the Union of African Railways between 2006 and 2009, and I hold the title of a lifetime president, honorary lifetime president of the railway. And in 2003, Chairperson, in Durban, we hosted the World Ports Conference, which was the first time that this type of conference had ever been hosted on the continent of Africa. I now turn, Chairperson, to the testimony of Todd. Chairperson, Todd sought to mislead the Commission to the effect that I was at TFR not on merit.
I'm sorry, just repeat that sentence.
He sought to mislead the Commission to say that I was at TFR not on merit, but because Gigaba had handpicked me so that I could contribute to the project of what is now known as state capture. A phenomenon, Chairperson, where you as Chairperson are required to make a determination as to its definition, where you are required to make a determination as to its nature, form, and content, as well as what characterized it, and if it exists, and who the key players are. Todd's contention is that I did not qualify for the job of Group Chief Executive at Transnet. But he does not indicate what he bases his false assertions on. He has not professed to be a rail or a ports person to know what qualifies a person for the post or the job of a Group Chief Executive at Transnet. I think that his allegations are worse than false. They are vindictive. And they are vindictive because Todd was involved in my disciplinary hearing in 2009, representing the company. And I will come back to that later in my testimony. Todd has never had sight of my performance ratings over the years. Yet he deems himself an expert and has personal knowledge of my performance and work ethic at Transnet, which he knows nothing about. It should be noted that Transnet has a performance management system which eradicates non-performers. So if I was a non-performer, I would have long gone. I would not have been there. But significantly, Todd makes false assertion that there was no evidence regarding the basis upon which the board of Transnet reinstated me, which has now been contradicted by a number of witnesses and on a number of occasions, and even by himself, as he successively files different affidavits to the commission. I will skip my other contribution, Chair, to another day.
Yes.
But Chair, I must indicate to you, Chairperson, that today I'm finally delighted to have the opportunity to address you on all of the matters that have been brought to the attention of the Commission concerning myself. And I believe that you will distill the true state of affairs from the falsities that have been advanced about me before you. There are still many issues that are outstanding that I would wish to address in this forum. However, I truly believe that my version and narration of events should be preferred or above that of sensationalist narrations that have been made by people such as Todd. I believe, Chairperson, that you are imbued with a desire to determine truth and to remove injustice, that you will be fair to all of us who appear before you, and more so of those of us who have been unjustly accused by people who have identified us, people who have defined us as their enemies, worthy to be tainted and to be defamed without providing the Commission with actual evidence. I have come here, Mr. Chairperson, in order to provide you with an honest version of events so as to assist the Commission in its findings. Transnet, as you will discern, was my lifelong passion and place of employment, and it provided me and my family with sufficient sustenance. The success of Transnet was my labor of love, and I would never do to Transnet anything that did not advance its growth and development. I have met and worked with more than 60,000 colleagues at Transnet who in some shape or form, and whether to a lesser or to a greater extent, relied on my expertise, who relied on my integrity, and who relied on my commitment, and that of the countless hardworking individuals who were with me day in, day out, and as I've indicated, most days at Transnet turned into nights while we advanced and protected Transnet's interests. My desire to contribute to the building of a new nation would be incomplete if Transnet were not to succeed in its quest to facilitate world-class logistics to strengthen our country's supply chain. A successful Transnet, to me, would no doubt contribute to the objectives of creating a sustainable and a capable developmental state. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gama.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Do you wish to say anything in response to any aspect, Mr. Myberg?
Not at this stage.
Not at this
We
stage.
may later say
Yes.
something. Thank you.
Okay, no, I just want to touch on a few matters, maybe 2 or 3. Thank you for your statement, Mr. Gama, and thank you for coming to participate in the commission and to put your version and to present yourself for questioning on any of the matters that the commission is looking at. I just want to say something about the commission's legal team and your complaints are about prejudice. It may be that Mr. Myberg intended doing so from the point of the legal team, and he may do so, he may say something at some stage, but I want to say something. To the extent that you were not given documents that you should have been given, or you were not given timeously documents that you should have been given timeously. To the extent that there is that situation, that's not the way the commission wishes to operate. But I must say that despite the commission's best efforts and the legal team's best efforts and the secretariat's best efforts, there have been occasions with different witnesses and different implicated persons. There have been occasions where things haven't happened the way they should have been. So that acknowledgement can be given, and it has happened openly and so on. And you may or may not be aware that there have been occasions when I've been harsh on the legal team when some of the failures have happened. So with regard to, with special reference to what happened in your case, I might not be aware. I'm just speaking in general that there have been occasions when such failures have occurred, sometimes with an explanation that gets given which is satisfactory, sometimes not satisfactory. But what we did, as you may be aware, or at least your legal team may be aware, is that when we drafted the rules, we included a provision that says if any person believes that they have not been given adequate notice in terms of the rules, they may apply to the chairperson for such a relief as would undo that prejudice that they may have suffered or that they may fear they will suffer. Now, of course, that's just all-embracive. It's not, it might not be very clear, but it reflects an intention that if there is some prejudice that anybody has suffered, we would like to look at how we can mitigate that or how that can be addressed. Of course, you have said that in recent times there has been a change of attitude in terms of the legal team providing information. So that I've noted. But I must also say that there was a time in the life of the Commission when the Transnet workstream, which is the workstream under which you fall, had certain challenges because there were changes in the legal team that was handling Transnet. And that took some time Mr. Myberg was not always here. He joined the legal team only from a certain time last year. So there had been, the Transnet workstream had been handled by other people before. So that also may have caused some problems, and maybe that might explain why at a certain time you might have received letters that say the legal team will look at it and then nothing comes back. But that's not justification, it's just to explain that there were these challenges. So I thought I would just touch on that. And then I think I need to say, you will deal with Mr. Todd's evidence. I didn't understand his evidence to be to the effect that he was doubting your competence or performance in terms of your work. I understood him to be saying because certain findings had been made against you in the disciplinary inquiry, he had a certain view arising out of that. But of course, that can be traversed in case I misunderstood him. I think that's what I wanted to say, and other than also to say, it's quite important that you use this opportunity to put your side of the story, to provide whatever explanation, because irrespective of what, as chairperson, I will find, it's important that people know what your version is, people know what your response is to certain allegations. Because, whatever I might find, people might say, but we had Mr. Gama's explanation. We believe what he said. The chairman can find whatever, but we understand what he had to say. So it's very important to use the opportunity to put your side of the story and deal with whatever allegations. So I thought I would just mention that. But I must also say that I believe that as you acknowledge that there's been a positive change on the legal team in terms of furnishing you with information documents, my impression also is that, at least in terms of what I've seen in the past few days, you and your legal team have been cooperative with the Commission, and that is appreciated. Okay, all right. Let's continue then, Mr. Myberg. I think we can
Yes,
start.
thank you, DCJ.
Yes.
Mr. Gama, I'd like to take another shot at trying to admit your affidavits into evidence. So we're in bundle 7, exhibit 28. That's the first part that's before you, DCJ, your file.
Oh, okay. I hope you and I have the same thing.
Yes, we
now.
do.
Okay.
The first part. And could I ask you to go to page 22, please?
Okay, I've got it.
Mr. Gama,
Yeah, I'm on 22.
find an affidavit that starts at page 22. You know we're using the black numbers.
Yeah.
And runs through to page 115, including annexures.
Just remember to move the mic towards you again, Mr. Myberg.
Do you confirm that?
Yeah. 115, yeah.
Yeah. And could I take you then to the signature page of the affidavit, page 57? will you confirm that you deposed to this affidavit on the 29th of January 2021?
Correct.
And will you confirm the truth and accuracy of the affidavit?
That's correct.
I think your voice goes down, Mr. Gama, so just try and speak up.
Let me sit closer to the mic.
Yes, yeah, that's much better. Did you proceed to the second affidavit?
I don't know, did I miss your response? You confirm the truth and accuracy of the affidavit?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that in respect of the first or the second?
The first affidavit.
Okay.
And could I take them one at a time?
That's fine.
DCJ, could I
That's
ask
fine.
you, please, then to admit this affidavit, signed on the 29th of January 2021, as Exhibit 28.3.1.
As exhibit? As
Twen-
exhibit?
28.3.1.
Okay. The affidavit of Mr. Siyabonga Gama, which starts at page 22, is admitted and will be marked as exhibit 28.3.1.
Thank you. And Mr. Gama, could you then please turn to your second affidavit that you find commencing at page 116, and it runs through the series of annexures to page 234.
Okay, I got it.
You confirm that?
Yes.
And then if we go, I beg your pardon, to the signature page of this affidavit that you find at page 169. And would you confirm that you deposed to this affidavit on the 31st of January 2021?
I confirm.
And would you confirm the truth and accuracy of the affidavit?
Yes.
Chairperson, could I then ask you to admit Mr. Gama's affidavit deposed to on the 31st of January this year, commencing at page 116, as Exhibit 28.3.2?
And the affidavit of Mr. Siyabonga Gama, which starts at page 116, is admitted as an exhibit and will be marked as exhibit 28.3.2.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Gama, I want to start by asking you a few questions, just to make sure that we all appreciate the time at which you served as the CEO of TFR and then as the Group Chief Executive. In what years were you the CEO of Transnet Freight Rail?
Just 1 second, Mr. Myberg. We probably will need to have Mr. Siyabonga's opening statement also admitted, but you might wish to deal with that later.
I'll find a place for that at tea time, DCJ, and work out where it would best fit.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Mr. Gama, in what years did you serve as the CEO of TFR?
It was between 2005 and 2015.
And then I understand, you must correct me if I'm wrong, that you acted as the Group Chief Executive of Transnet from April 2015 to April 2016. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you were then appointed as the Group Chief Executive of Transnet in April of 2016.
That's correct.
And you held that position until October of 2018.
That's correct.
And as we understand it, you took over, first in your position as the acting GCE, and then after that, having been appointed as GCE from Mr. Molefe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And perhaps I could also ask you to confirm, if I have it correctly, that the Group Chief Financial Officer under Mr. Molefe, Mr. Singh, he also was seconded and then became employed at Eskom, and that the Group Chief Financial Officer that served under you, effectively Mr. Singh's replacement, was a Mr. Peter. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mr. Singh also served under me for a brief period when I was acting.
Yes.
Is that before he got seconded to ESCOM?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'd like now to turn to the question of your visits to Saxonwold and your connection with the Guptas. You explain in your affidavit how you came to visit the Saxonwold compound of the Guptas, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, on one occasion. Could you explain that to us, please?
Yes, thank you very much. You want me to give background and context?
Anything that you wish to in that context, yes.
Okay. Yes, I had, through my interactions at Transnet, we had an entity that was called Regiments that was assisting us on a number of operational issues together with McKinsey, mainly dealing with some re-engineering work where we were trying to make sure that we improve and increase our capacity around the coal line, first and foremost. But also they had done some work for us when we were looking at the Maputo corridor and looking at how best we could re-engineer that corridor, because it was also a corridor which was full of, there were many trucks on the road, especially to the port of Maputo. So I had on occasion met a fellow by the name of Salim Issa, I think on one occasion in that meeting. And I believed that he was part of Regiment. I then, on a different occasion, accosted Mr. Issa. He was in our offices. I had gone to see Mr. Singh, who was, his office was just a few meters from mine, and he was there. So I spoke to Mr. Singh briefly. They were together. I just said, look, can I chat with Mr. Singh? We had a discussion. Then it said to me, look, at some point I'd like to have a chat with you. I said to him, no, that's fine. Just ask Mr. Singh to give you my number, and we can get together. It's not a problem. So we left it at that. And I think some time later, Mr. Issa then tried to call me. He called me several times, but I wasn't available. But I think I really don't have the dates.
No, that's fine. Yeah,
I don't have the dates, but
yeah.
I've got
the year you would remember.
I've got an approximate time to say. I think it must have been around October or November of 2015, when I eventually had agreed that okay, we will meet. He gave me an address, and I went there. It then turned out afterwards when I went there that this was actually not an office park, but it was actually the Gupta residence.
Yes, Mr. Mayberg.
Yes, you want to carry on with your visit to Saxonwold. What happened then? Sorry, Mr. Gama, if I may say, you're more than welcome to look at your affidavit as I'm asking you these questions. Do you want to turn to page 47?
I think he thought you might have a further question.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
So now the further question is, as I understand it, you say that Mr. Essa effectively invited you to a meeting, and that's how you found your way.
47 will be the black numbers, Mr. Gama, not the red numbers. You can ignore the red numbers. Top left corner of each page, black numbers. 47, Mr. Mayberg is not going to say Transnet 07-0467. He'll just say page 47. So you'll know what he's talking about. Okay, I think you might wish to repeat your question, Mr. Mayberg.
Yes, so as I understand it, you were invited to a meeting by Mr. Essa, and that's how you found your way to the Saxonwold residence of the Guptas. Could you explain what happened there, please?
Yes, at that venue, I met with Mr. Issa. He was waiting for me outside. We went inside. We went into something that looked like a boardroom, and we sat there and we exchanged pleasantries. And after a few minutes, somebody that was introduced to me as Tony Gupta, who I later found out is also known as Rajesh Gupta. He came and greeted me, and we had a discussion. It was not a very long discussion, but Mr. Gupta was just indicating to me that they had followed my career within Transnet, and he thought that I had done very well in the company, and that they had certain businesses, and that it was their view that at some point maybe we could have a discussion around how Transnet and those businesses could cooperate going forward. But there wasn't really anything in particular at that point in time in terms of what it is that he thought that we would do. But he was saying, look, I think we can probably meet again at a later date when we have enough time, and then I can take you through some of the entities that we have, which I think might have a bearing on some of the work that you do at Transnet. So,
And this was Tony Gupta talking.
Yes, yes. So I just inquired to him to say what would be the nature of that relationship that he was talking about, but there wasn't anything really specific. So I was a bit annoyed because one...
Did you feel like your time had been wasted?
Yeah, I think the first thing was that I had thought that I am going to meet Issa at his offices. And then I realized that no, we're actually at the boardroom of their residence. And there wasn't really anything. I mean, if they told me I'm going to somebody's home, I probably would not have even agreed to the...
And was Mr. Issa around as Mr. Tony Gupta was talking to you?
Yes, no, he was with me all the time. In fact, he walked me out as I left, and I expressed my dissatisfaction to him to say, look, you shouldn't ambush me and bring me to people's homes when I thought you wanted to talk about the business. So he just said, look, I just thought I must introduce you to Mr. Tony, as he called him. because this family it does a lot of business, and they're influential. I thought that it would be good for you and Transnet to work with them, but obviously you're in a hurry and he's in a hurry. But maybe at a future date we could find time to talk about.
Was it when you met Mr. Tony Gupta? Was it was he the first Gupta brother that you had met, that you were meeting? In other words, you had not met any of the other Gupta brothers at that time.
I think at that time the popular Gupta brother in that I would see in the newspaper was Atul Gupta. I always used to see his picture.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'd never met him.
You had never met him.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Maida.
Yes, thank you. So, as I understand it, Mr. Gama, you say that's the one and only time that you went to the Saxonwold residence of the Guptas.
That's correct.
And did you
I just want to say it's interesting that Mr. Gama says I think that Mr. Essa said that the Guptas were a very influential family because that seems consistent with what Mr. Hank Bester says he told him when they had a meeting in 2014. Mr. Hank Bester said,
Yes.
He said, we are very powerful. Something like that. We are very powerful. We have decided that the next boss of ESCOM will be Mr. Brian Molefe. So Mr. Essa here to you says, the Guptas are a very influential family. Yeah, okay.
Do you wish to add anything to that, Mr. Gama?
No, I'm not privy to, I don't know who Mr. Bester is.
No, that's fine.
So, as you say, paragraph 31.1 of your affidavit, that was the only time that you went to the Saxonwold residence of the Guptas.
Yes.
Did you, after that, have occasion to interact at all with Tony Gupta?
No, I haven't.
Did you have occasion to interact at all with AJ Gupta?
No, I haven't.
And Mr. Essa?
Yes, Mr. Essa, I did.
In what context did you interact with Mr. Essa, and over what period of time?
Yeah. I've probably seen Mr. Essa maybe 4 or 5 times, I don't know. The next time that I would see him was in Dubai, a month or 2 later. He was always, I think, in this management consulting sort of space, as I understood it then. When I traveled to Switzerland, which was to the World Economic Forum, on my way back, I had a stopover in Dubai, and that's where I met him.
So that was the next time you met him?
That was the next time that I met him.
I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, that you said that you met him subsequently on 4 or 5 occasions. Could you describe the other occasions to us, please?
I probably have met him, I think it was the 3rd or the 4th occasion when I met him at the Gupta residence. I met him once in Dubai. I probably met him one more other time after he came back to the country.
Chairperson, would this be a convenient time to take the tea adjournment?
Yes, let's take the tea adjournment. It's 1:15, so we will resume at 30:30. We
Yep.
adjourn. Okay, let's continue.
Thank you, Chairperson. So we had stopped at the point that you were telling us.
One second, Mr. Mybeck. Okay,
Thank you. We had stopped at the point where you were telling us, I think, about your third meeting with Mr. Essa. So you met him, or you've explained how you went to the Saxonwold compound where you met him. You said a month or so later you met him in Dubai, and then your last interaction with him, when was that and what was it around?
So I think I've met him, I've seen him. I didn't have a meeting. I'm saying I've seen him after Dubai. I've seen him somewhere. I think I saw him. He was in a restaurant.
All right.
Yeah.
Sort of you casually saw him.
Yeah.
All right. Have you ever been to Mr. S's office, which I understand to have been in Melrose Arch?
No.
Had you ever been to his apartment?
No.
So both he and Mr. Tony Gupta never followed up on what they talked about, which seemed to be that they wanted to have further meeting for further discussion to do business together.
No, there was not a follow-up because
Yes.
I think I had said to Mr. Issa that no, I wasn't really interested in, meeting people in their houses and things like that. I was quite annoyed, I think, on that day. So I only ever spoke to him later when we were in Dubai and we were talking about, he was thinking about setting up what he called a BE consulting entity that he was thinking about, that he thought would have a lot of black people, especially women and all of that.
Mr. Gama, if I could just take you to your affidavit, please, at page 47. The first time that you met Mr. Essa, you deal with that at paragraph 31.2.1. You say it was during
Page 40?
47,
Yeah.
paragraph 31.2.1.
Yeah.
You say that was in 2015. You attended a meeting with representatives of regiments. Would that meeting have been at the Carlton Centre?
No. This particular meeting, I think it was at TFR.
So was this at a time then before you had become, presumably, you acted as the group chief executive?
Yeah.
So it was probably in the early part of 2015.
That's correct, yeah.
And then you say at paragraph 31.3, the next time you met him, that was July/August 2015, that was in Mr. Singh's office. This then was at a time when you were the acting group chief executive?
That's correct, I was at the Carlton Centre.
And it was also at a time then before Mr. Singh went to Eskom. This must be the time where he was reporting to you.
Yes.
And do I understand from paragraph 31.2.1 and 31.2.2 that you assumed when you first met Mr. Essa that he worked for regiments?
Yes.
And when did you come to learn that that wasn't so?
Much later.
When?
I think and I think he was also on the same page with me to say, okay, I think he's a regiment's management consultant, and he was telling me about management consulting. But I think much later, must have been sometime in 2016, when regiments wanted to cede their their contracts with Transnet to Trillian. Then his name was not appearing amongst the directors, and it was actually Pillay and not Isa that was appearing. So then I realized that I may have made a mistaken assumption about that. Yeah.
All right, I'd like now to turn to the MBA issue. Could I ask you to go the alleged assistance given to you by Mr. Sagar / McKinsey in relation to your MBA?
Okay.
And perhaps, Mr. Gama, in fairness, this is not something that you've dealt with in your affidavit. So let me take you to the documents that are relevant. And we can go through them, and then, of course, you will be afforded an opportunity to say what you would like to. You were issued with a 3-3 notice by the money flow team in late November 2020. That you find at page 235 of your exhibit. And attached to that Rule 3.3 notice was an extract of an affidavit from a Mr. Mzala. And that you find the extract commencing at page 240. Are you there?
Yeah.
I'm going to take you through these extracts, if I may. At 240, it states that the growing body of evidence provided by the Commission that suggests a pattern of misconduct by regiments at these entities. This includes, in particular, regiments having entered into an agreement with Mr. Salim Essa and other individuals linked publicly to state capture to engage in a patterning of troubling payments that we were unaware of at the time the work was being conducted. In brackets, I leave open here and in the next paragraph the possible exception of Mr. Vikas Sagar, a former partner of our firm whose circumstances are discussed fully below. And then, if I could take you to page 243, 243. The second paragraph between the two dark blocks. While the media has reported on allegations related to regiments and the Commission has now presented evidence related to concerning behaviour by regiments, we have not found evidence that anyone at McKinsey knew of this activity at the time it was occurring. In brackets, I leave open here the possible exception of Mr. Sagar, whose circumstances are discussed more fully below. And that then brings us to page 244 at paragraph 7.2.1 between the two dark boxes. MBA assistance in July of 2017, McKinsey was first provided information that indicated that Mr. Sagar, whilst with McKinsey, may have helped coordinate research support and draft coursework for the MBA studies of Transnet's then CEO, Mr. Siyabonga Gama, in late 2015 and early 2016. And then if you go to page 245, at the foot of the page, paragraph 7.2.4.1, In addition to the MBA assistance and the 9 February 2016 letter, in brackets both discussed in more detail below, our issues of concern with Mr. Sagar also stem from the forensic analysis conducted on his computer and phone after collection in 2017 as part of the investigation. And then if I could take you please to page 242 at the top, paragraph 7.2.4.2.1. Of particular importance, the document set includes an email dated 16 November 2015 from Clive Angel to Mr. Sagar and Mr. Wood, copying Mr. Esser.
Did you say 242?
Yeah,
Did you
mine,
say-
mine is blank.
246.
Yeah, mine is blank too.
246?
Oh, 246, I think you may have said 242. Okay, all right.
I think what's happening, DCJ, is I might have been looking at the red numbers. I'm sorry. Mr. Mr. Gama, can I just take you back? I referred you just now to page 243. You saw that part, black numbers. You saw that part in the middle. 243.
Yes, the
Okay.
one,
And then 244, the MBA assistance part, you saw that? 244.
yes,
All right.
you read through that.
And then 245 we've dealt with. I was on 246, where there's reference to Mr. Esser. And then I want to deal with the next subparagraph at 246, paragraph 7.2.4.2.2. The document set also includes an email response dated 18 November 2015 from Mr. Sagar to Mr. Angel and Mr. Esser that was sent from Mr. Sagar's personal email address. Assuming it is authentic, which we have no reason to believe it's not, the email suggests that Mr. Sagar chose to move his communications with Mr. Esser off of McKinsey's system to the personal email account. So those are the various of the extracts. And what we do know is that out of caution, McKinsey then made a report in terms of section 34(1) of the Prevention and Combating of Corruption Activities Act. That report you find at page 249. And can I direct your attention, please, to paragraph 2, little c, right at the foot of the page. A company contractor contacted McKinsey on 12 July 2017 concerning a request he received from Mr. Vikas Sagar, a former partner of the company, to provide assistance to Siyabonga Gama, in brackets, then the acting chief executive of Transnet, in connection with Mr. Gama's MBA coursework, including Mr. Gama's MBA, quote, capstone project in December 2015 - January 2016. Little B, McKinsey commissioned an investigation into the matter which revealed the following. 1, Mr. Gama was enrolled in the TRUM Global Executive MBA program, in brackets, class of 2016. 2, it appears that Mr. Sagar coordinated research support for Mr. Gama on one group assignment. On the second assignment, Mr. Gama provided coursework materials created by Mr. Gama and his fellow student team members to Mr. Sagar. In turn, Mr. Sagar supplemented this coursework using company resources and contractors to outline and help draft the 2 chapters which Mr. Gama submitted as his contribution to the capstone project. Little e, the support commissioned by Mr. Sagar caused the company to incur costs of 100,000 rand. Little f, I'm unaware of any quid pro quo sought by Mr. Sagar or received by the company in exchange for the benefit, etc. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes. No, thank you very much. It is true that Mr. Saga introduced us to a person who was supposedly an editor We were writing a capstone project. I think there were 5 or 6 of us.
That is who were doing the MBA.
Yes, the
Okay.
capstone project is about 5 or 6 of us who were writing that capstone project. In fact, a lot of the people had, they were, I was collecting information from the different students, let's call them students, in order for us to write the final project report. As you would know, with people from different nationalities, and I was having difficulties in terms of the manner in which they presented or they wrote or the writing styles. And I wanted to have one consistent writing style for the project. So he then introduced me to somebody that he said was an editor. I did not know whether this person was contracted to McKinsey or not. I never asked. But he said, look, you can speak to this lady. She's an editor. She can help you with your particular challenges. So I then took that content and I said, look, this is the work that we've been doing. Can you assist us to write it in a particular way? Which she did, and that was around Christmas time of December 2015 to around maybe the 15th of January. I think the project was due around the 14th of January, thereabout. So it was a 2-week period. When people were enjoying Christmas time, I remember that there was no Christmas for me.
You had no Christmas.
Yeah, that particular year. So I went through it. She helped me, and together with some of the other people would then say, we were giving her the content because she wasn't a subject matter expert to help us to edit it. And we did acknowledge in our capstone project the good work that she helped us with in terms of editing the work. That it is said here that Mr. Saga contributed or supplemented this using company resources. I'm not familiar with it. It's something to do with them. He never told me that this was a McKinsey resource or anything. He just indicated to me that this lady could assist us, and she did do that. There isn't any chapters that Mr. Saga contributed for me. The interesting thing, we were doing last mile logistics, Chair. And our subject matter was a place in India, in Calcutta, where they have what is called Kirana stores. So this is a global MBA, so you need to understand everything that happens in other countries. And we had a research team that we had dispatched there to help us. And now we were putting together the findings of this team. So one of the things that I'd shared with Mr. Saga, who is a native of India, was that we're doing last mile logistics about India. And he took an interest in it, to say, oh, so how far are you now with these things that you're doing? Because the concept of Kirana stores being used as last mile logistics was something that had not been thought of, and we came up with an IT system that could actually plug into global logistics companies such as DHL, and other places. So it's like if, for instance, you wanted to deliver something in the township or in an informal settlement where there are no addresses. So and people go to work during the day, there's no one, and people will only be there at night. And everybody frequents this store. So if they have a parcel, they will then have to go there. What we use is the fact that they have a cell phone. And then we can tell them, and then they can track it. But they go and fetch it from the Karana store. So that was sort of the nub of it, Chair. So I would just share with him from time to time. Say, how far are you? I would share with him, no, this is where we are. It's interesting. And then he'd say, yeah, it's actually quite interesting. Because we're dealing with global companies like Amazon. People can order a parcel from Amazon and it gets delivered through the Karana store. And we've now created this software and we're putting together some warehouses in and around this place where you can distribute parcels from there. So that really was what it was. So I did send him some of the information just out of interest and courtesy, because he was interested. Not that we asked him to do anything for us. He wouldn't be able to do anything for us. We had a research team in India that was doing these things for us.
So did you pay this editor?
No, she never sent an invoice.
And as I understand it, did she work intensely like you did for 2 weeks over Christmas?
Well, I worked over Christmas. She did the work, it was after Christmas. I think it must have been for about 3 or 4 days between the 4th and the 8th of January or something. But it was me who was working. I did most of the work, but it was difficult because of the writing styles of 5 or 6 different people. And when I sent the work to her, she was able to distill it very quickly. I think she does this for a living.
But Mr. Gama, it seems, who did you think was paying this person?
She never sent me an invoice, actually. In fact, it's something that, when you're in the middle of things like this, I was just worried about delivering the capstone project. I did, in fact, sometime later try to send her an email to say, you never sent me an invoice, but I never got an answer from that person. I don't know. From what I gather here, he may or may not have been paid by Mr. Saga. I don't know.
Well, it does appear from what was sent to you that disciplinary charges were brought against Mr. Sagar, and then he and McKinsey parted ways. So if we go to paragraph 2, as I understand it, you deny, we needn't read it again, but you essentially deny everything that is recorded there. You say, well, I might have sent Mr. Sagar some of my work, but it was only because he was taking an interest in it.
I'm sorry, have you gone to his affidavit?
No, paragraph 2 of the section 34 report at page 250.
Oh, okay, all right. Yes,
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah, no, this speculation by McKinsey is denied.
Speculation by McKinsey.
That he may have contributed to my coursework. He wouldn't have.
Well, I don't know whether you want to say you deny that, because it may be that you don't know, but he made arrangements with the editor and did pay the editor without your knowing.
No, I'm not talking about the payment. He's talking about the 2 chapters that he says.
Okay. I missed that. Yes, Mr. Maybeck?
Yes, thank you. So the second or the third sentence, in turn, Mr. Sagar supplemented this coursework, you don't agree with that, using company resources and contractors to outline. But you don't, as I understand it, you accept there's a possibility that Mr. Sagar might have engaged someone to assist you that you didn't know of.
No, I didn't know of it. He introduced me to the lady. I was in communication with her on email.
And then you see it says the support commissioned by Sagar caused the company to incur costs of 100,000 rand. Do you have any comment on that?
No, I cannot comment on.
So what I'd like to explore then is your relationship with Mr. Sagar. When did you first meet him?
Let me also just indicate to you, Chair, that subsequent to these revelations, as it were, my MBA program did an extensive investigation.
I'm sorry, your MBA program?
They did an extensive investigation.
Yes, the institution.
The institution.
Yeah.
Into this work, and I participated, and they are quite happy in terms of what happened and transpired here, and there's nothing untoward in terms of the NBA
The
program.
content.
Yeah. I cannot recall, Mr. Mayberg, when I met Mr. Sagar. He was working for McKinsey. McKinsey has been at Transnet since at least 2005. And I think at some point he must have been one of the consultants that came through. I don't know at what point that he came through. I worked with him quite a bit, I think, around 2012. I don't know when I first met with him.
So what you can say, I would imagine, is that by 2015, you had known him for quite some time, for a number of years.
Yeah, I think I worked with him around 2012.
Yeah, okay.
And did you then continue working with him when you took up the position as the acting Group Chief Executive of Transnet, 2015?
Yes.
You've seen from the portions of the affidavit that I've read to you that he seems to have interacted, at least at a point, with Mr. Esser. Presumably you didn't know anything about that.
No, I didn't know anything.
You say that your global MBA, TRUM, they conducted an investigation after these revelations.
Yes.
Would you be prepared to share those documents with us?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like now to turn to a different topic, and that's your reinstatement at TFR as the CFO in February of 2011. So, Mr.
Can I
CEO,
correct you?
Yeah, as CEO, not CFO.
CEO.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make you someone else. I'm sorry. So it's your reinstatement as CEO. Now, Mr. Gama, I think it's important to explain that the main focus of...
Which section do you want to refer
No,
me to?
we're not in any particular section. It's important to explain in relation to your reinstatement that the main focus of the Commission's investigation is whether or not your reinstatement was the result of any political instruction or pressure. That's the main focus of the instruction. And flowing from that, really the main target of the investigation, or focus of the investigation, is Mr. Gigaba and also the board, because it was the board that decided to reinstate you. You would have seen that. correct?
Maybe
Yes, it was the board.
maybe one could just say, Mr. Maybeck, whether there was political pressure or political interference, or whether even without political interference, there was something untoward
Yes.
that made the decision to make the
Yes.
board to make the decision, generally speaking.
Yes. In other words, Chair, to your point, something other than the issue of prospects of success. So what is important for you to appreciate as we go through this topic is the actual target of the investigation is not you. The target is rather the people who decided to do that, the board. I take it you appreciate that.
Yeah, I also wanted to emphasize that because you did not reinstate yourself.
It would be quite impossible, Chair.
Yeah, yeah. So as you approach the evidence and issues that will be raised with you and questions, you must remember that the primary focus is relates to those who made the decision to reinstate you, rather than you come in simply because they were supposed to have regard to certain things in making those decisions. Okay, all right.
So it's important.
Yes, Chair, I have been a case study in this commission. Where I think people have made numerous inferences, where my name has been brought in, but nothing to do with what I did.
Yes, no. It's important for you to understand that when I say what I've just said and when Mr. Maybeck says what he has said, namely that the focus is on those who made the decision to reinstate you, you need to appreciate that that is not to prevent you from making an input into the discussion. It's not meant to do that, but it's just to indicate that since you didn't reinstate yourself, the focus is on those who made the decision.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
So I think perhaps put another way, Mr. Gama, I mean, what is going to form really the subject of my questioning of you is not whether you think you were correctly reinstated, I'm quite sure you do, but rather what motivated the board to reinstate you. You appreciate that?
And it may well be, it may well be that on many issues you might have nothing to say, and well, ask the board.
Yes.
So, but where you want to say something, feel free.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's start off with the questioning, potential political influence or interference. Perhaps we can start with the evidence of Barbara Hogan. Now, we have a transcript of the relevant portion. Perhaps I could just ask you to turn behind you to bundle BB15. And this is Transnet Bundle 2.
Yes,
You have it.
I've got it.
Could I ask you please to turn to page 216. Now, when Ms. Hogan gave evidence, she testified about the stance adopted by the former president in relation to you. And could I ask you, please, to go to 216 to line 20? And this discussion appears to have been had at a time when you were suspended.
I'm sorry, what page?
216.
Okay.
At line 20, she says, Chair, I was extremely shocked. The President wouldn't hear of any candidate except Siyabonga Gama. We're talking about the candidate for Transnet GCE. I informed him how professional the selection process was. I informed him that he was facing some serious misconduct charges, that the board, in terms of the PFMA, was obliged to investigate these charges. It was not just going ahead, and under these circumstances, it would not be in the interest of Transnet to appoint a group CEO who was facing, whose time would be caught up with defending himself in a misconduct. But even over and above that, I was recommending Mr. Maseko, on the basis of the recommendations made by the Transnet, the recommendations made by the Professional Evaluation Agency. Now, can I then ask you to turn to page 223? And if I could ask you please to have regard to line 3, where Ms. Hogan says, yes, it actually shocked me. He then said to me, you may not appoint anyone to the board because the board also had to have changes until Mr. Gama's disciplinary was over. Because I said to him, we cannot appoint him until the disciplinary is over, if that is the candidate that you are insisting on. Then if I could take you please over the page to page 224 and direct your attention to line 13. Ms. Hogan continued, no, at the same meeting, initially he wanted me to go ahead with the appointment of Mr. Gama. I said, I cannot do that. The kind of compromise he then said, he said, all right, we will wait until the disciplinary process is over. I do not agree to that, sorry, I did not agree to that. But we then agreed that I'd provide him with further information, which I then did. If you go to page 227, in a similar vein, at line 9, he was insisting firstly that I go ahead and appoint Gama. Now you would have seen that that's opposite Mr. McKenna's name, but it clearly was Ms. Hogan because the chairperson directed a question at her. He was insisting firstly that I go ahead and appoint Gama. I said I could not. He was facing misconduct charges and he was not the preferred candidate. He then said that no appointment to translate must be made until the disciplinary case against Mr. Gama is concluded. I was concerned about that and I said I would provide him with further evidence. I was already, remember, I was only 1 month into the job, but I was already feeling that the President was exceeding his authority here. And I was truly shocked, when you explain to the President that a person is facing misconduct charges, you expect a certain response to say, that says, oh, well, if that is the case, let us look at the preferred candidate that the board is recommending.
It looks like Mr. Mayberg, the transcribers may not have made it clear that part of what you're reading was what she said. It looks like it was the evidence leader.
Yes, I've made that point.
Yes,
DCJ, yes.
But the context makes it clear, I think.
Yes,
that
absolutely.
It's she who is talking.
And then if I could take you, please, to page 250. And what now happened is that the evidence leader read into the record her statement relating to the evidence that she had given. Her statement there you see it, paragraph 11, recorded, I was shocked and disappointed when President Zuma informed me that he was adamant that Mr. Gama was his only choice for the group CEO. I informed him that that was not possible and that Mr. Gama was not the board's choice and I could not override the board as they had undergone a very professional selection process. I further informed President Zuma that Mr. Gama was the subject of an inquiry into procurement irregularities and that it would be very messy to appoint a group CEO who could potentially be facing fairly serious charges. 2 lines below that, President Zuma said that if that was my view, no appointment whatsoever was to be made at Transnet until Mr. Gama's disciplinary process was over. We agreed that I'd provide him with more detailed information to further apply his mind. Do you see that? And then if you go to page 253, there's another quote from her statement. Mr. Gama was formally charged by Transnet and later suspended on 1 September 2009. Immediately before and in the days following his suspension, Mr. Jeff Radebe, quote, Gama will become CEO. Minister Sipiwe Nyanda, quote, Gama is being persecuted like Jacob Zuma, and also ANC. The SACP and the ANC Youth League under Julius Malema at the time all issued strong and harsh statements in support of Gama, accusing Transnet of persecuting him. This was reflected in numerous statements and media reports. Did you have occasion to see those media reports at the time of your suspension?
Maybe.
Or maybe even before your suspension.
I think, I think it would be, I may have seen some, I've seen some newspaper clippings now which are reduced and I can't really read what was being said there. But I guess if I was in the middle of that storm, I would have read some of them.
So there you seem to have quite a lot of political support amongst the people, Minister Radebe, Minister Nyanda, who we'll come back to in due course, etc.
When you say I seem to have a political support from the ANC, the SACP, the Youth League, the South African Transport Union, as it's written here, how does that bring about a situation of state capture?
Well, it depends what's behind this, Mr. Gama.
No, I'm just asking because.
Yeah.
Well, I think allow Mr. Maibek to pursue his line of questioning.
Okay.
Yes, as I said, some of the things you might have nothing to say because people may have been talking about you and you were not part of that or making whatever statements, but some you might wish to say something.
No, it's fine. I see that he's formulating a hypothesis, Chair. So it's a thesis that he wants to posit. Okay.
Well, he is bringing to your attention some of the matters that may appear to be relevant to ultimately your reinstatement. Of course, you and your counsel in due course might say, no, they are irrelevant, but that's the context. He wants to bring this to attention. And then where you are able to comment, you may comment. Where you're not able to, it's fine. Yes, Mr. Maibeth.
Thank you. Could we then go, please, to page 267? And if I could direct your attention to line 22, again, Ms. Hogan. No, I did await the outcome of the disciplinary hearing. But once that outcome, once he was found guilty on the 3 counts and dismissed on all 3 counts, the Deputy Minister and myself initiated a process to appoint a new Transnet board. And that was then a year after all of this had happened, and it was then towards July, August 2010. That was following your dismissal. You, as I have it, this is what's recorded in the settlement agreement, which we'll come to. You were dismissed on the 29th of June, 2010. Does that accord with your recollection? 29 June, 2010.
Okay, we're going to have to record it as a sad day, yeah.
And then can I take you, please, to page 277. Ms. Hogan says at line 3, well, Mr. Gama was fired at the end of 2010. I was fired by the President at the end of October 2010. She goes on to say at line 10 that Mr. Brian Molefe was appointed as the CEO of Transnet, and a few lines below that, then Mr. Gama was reappointed as the CEO of Transnet Freight Rail. It was a couple of months later, on the grounds that they had reviewed the sanction and had an independent review. I do not quite know what that was about, and that the board felt that the sanction that had been applied was too harsh. Chairperson, it was now a different board from the one that was in existence during your time. Yes, this was the board that had been appointed by Minister Gigaba, who succeeded me. And then, if I can take you to page 278, at line 18, Ms. Hogan talks of a memorandum that was prepared by her department. This was after your dismissal. It was a submission to Cabinet for the appointment of a new board to Transnet. She then, 2 lines below that, confirms, Council asks, you signed that memorandum on 27 October 2010. She says, yes. And then if you go to page 279, also towards the foot of the page at lines 24, Ms. Hogan, so now the President has said, I cannot go ahead until Gama is dismissed. Gama is dismissed. I sent the details of the judgment, the entire judgment, to the President, started processing a Cabinet memorandum for the appointment of the new Transnet board. That is post Gama's dismissal, yes. And it's really in that context that she explains, as she put it, that she was fired at the end of October 2010. And we know then that she was replaced by Minister Gigaba with effect, I think it was, from the 1st of January that year. Now, Mr. Gama, did you know anything about this?
No.
Did you know that you enjoyed the support of former President Zuma to be appointed as the next Group Chief Executive of Transnet?
No.
Did you come to learn that Minister Hogan appears to have fallen out of favour in relation to you?
I don't know that.
Did you come to learn of that in the press or at any time after this?
No, I don't know whether it had anything to do with me or that it was one of the things. I don't know. I don't know. I don't appoint cabinets.
Yes,
I think it's a question that you must pose to Mr. Zuma.
Mr. Chair, I must at this stage, I've been quite patient listening to what has been put to my client. and I didn't want to unnecessarily object to this line of questioning, but I failed to appreciate, and I say this in the context of what was previously indicated to my client by Mr. Myburgh, and even respectfully by yourself, that this line of questioning is not aimed at establishing whether he had a role to play or even a part in his reinstatement. Now he's being questioned as to his knowledge of matters which really have nothing to do with him. It's in the context of him having been told, but it's not alleged or insinuated or suggested in no manner of means that you had any role to play in that. In the context of that, it's my submission that this line of questioning is wholly irrelevant. If that's not what it seeks to establish, then Mr. Myburgh must make his position clear, because it is not relevant unless it is, of course, suggested that my client had some role to play, which is then a contradiction in what was put to him this morning. To the extent that Mr. Myburgh finds it appropriate to refer to the evidence of Ms. Hogan and press articles, that may be evidence before you. It's irrelevant for my client in that context to be called upon to deliver some kind of response or even an opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Myburgh?
So I think our position is that we certainly don't intend to question Mr. Gama about the merits of the decision to reinstate him. In other words, whether he thinks it was a good or bad decision in labour law. But it's always been our case, and Mr. Gama knows this because of the 3-3s that have been issued and the questions that have been posed to him, that there's an investigation into whether or not some influence, political influence or otherwise, was brought to bear on his reinstatement. He was given a 3-3, I think you already know, in relation to Ms. Hogan's evidence. And one of the questions posed to him in, I think it was his second 3-3, was the question of any and all interaction that you had with former President Zuma and or former Minister Gigaba regarding your reinstatement as the CEO of Transnet Freight Rail. So those things are bound up, and I'm simply pursuing that line of inquiry.
Mr. Chair, if I might be
Yes.
permitted a short reply, that's not an answer to my objection. If that is what Mr. Myburgh seeks to achieve, it's a simple approach. Put it to the witness. There's no relevance to the line of questioning explored by him. He's now obfuscating the issue. It's not what I put in my objection. I said it was irrelevant to ask him whether he had comment on this. It was suggested to him this morning in unambiguous terms that he played no role. It's in the context of that I say it's irrelevant. If he says, well, I want to put questions directly to him in relation to that, then do so. But don't go and obfuscate matters. That's not my objection, with respect.
Yeah, I think what I think part of the inquiry is to determine whether the board's decision to reinstate Mr. Gama was arrived at because, at least in part, of any considerations that may be relevant to what the Commission is looking at. Now, I take it that Mr. Gama wishes to dispute any suggestion that in reinstating him, the board may have acted because of any considerations that should not have been taken into account. Now, of course, I'm talking within the context of the commission. And if he would seek to dispute or oppose any such proposition or line, to the extent that the legal team may want to say, if Ms. Hogan's evidence before the commission is true, if it is found to be true, for example, that in circumstances where the board of Transnet had gone through a professional selection criteria and recommended a certain candidate, and not Mr. Gama, but the former president, Mr. Zuma, took the stance that Ms. Barbara Hogan says he took, namely, for that position of Group CEO of Transnet, I want Mr. Gama and nobody else. And if you tell me that he may be facing or he is facing disciplinary processes, he can't be appointed at this stage because he's still facing that, the position will have to remain unfilled until those processes have been completed, because that's part of what Ms. Barbara Hogan said. It may well be that when that the legal team could look at the circumstances surrounding his reinstatement and say there may well be a connection with the stance allegedly taken by President Zuma in regard to how much he insisted that Mr. Gama should be the group CEO, which he did end up being, of course, and that will be dealt with later. It may well be that it's fair to highlight those things that the legal team might think they'll ask me to have regard to, so that Mr. Gama might say, I hear what you say, but look at this and that and that and that. Therefore, on the whatever may have happened, on the basis of the following facts or factors, the board's decision had nothing to do with those things. It just had to do with the merits of me as a CEO. So there is that possibility to say, if in the end it is possible that there is a risk that the legal team might argue that even if it's not because of anything he did, but his restatement was, at least in part, based on that political influence, it might be that it's fair that he must know exactly what the legal team is thinking and be able to say, no, but on the merits, I should have been reinstated or something like that. That's the thinking that I have about it. Okay, all right. I think you probably say, let's leave it there, Chair.
Out of respect, I'm not going to say anything further. Thank you.
Okay, all right, no, thanks. But the idea, and I know that, in my own mind, I think you all accept it. The idea is just to make sure that one doesn't have a situation where Mr. Gama hasn't had an opportunity to deal with something that might be relied upon later on. It's just to try and be fair. But again, where he has nothing to say, you know, it's fine. Mr. Mybeck?
Yes, thank you. Perhaps I could take you to page 58 of Bundle 7, your exhibit.
My exhibit.
Your exhibit, BB 28. If you could
Is
turn
that
to
a
page-
different bundle?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
Bundle 7, BB 28. If you could go to page 58.
Okay, Mr. Mybeck, always remember, Sue.
Bundle
mention
7.
The bundle, that helps me. Bundle 7, yeah. And what's the page number?
58, 58.
Okay, all right.
Are you there, Mr. Gama? This is your second regulation 10.6, notice to produce an affidavit. Could you go, please, to page 60, at paragraph 1.7 at the foot of the page? You were called upon to specifically address, in addition to the allegations in the aforementioned affidavits, in brackets and annexes, the following. 1.7.1, any and all interactions that you had with former President Zuma and or former Minister Gigaba regarding your reinstatement as the CEO of Transnet Freight Rail in 2011. Do you see that?
Yes.
Could we please then go to your answer to paragraph 1.7.1, and that you'll find at page 47. Are you there at 47?
Yes.
You see that you, at paragraph 29, answer at paragraph 1.7.1. Do you see that?
Yes.
And your answer is, I repeat what is contained in paragraph 6.3 above. You see that? So let's then go to paragraph 6.3 above. That you find at page 30. And your answer at 6.3, towards the foot of the page, is that I'm led to believe that my reinstatement followed after intense discussion and debate concerning the topic by the Transnet board. I assume the value I added to Transnet as referred to in paragraph 3 above may well have played a role in the board's deliberations. You see that?
Yes.
Perhaps I could pose the question to you again. That's posed at paragraph 1.7.1 of the regulation 10.6 notice. And that is, what interactions, if any, did you have with former President Zuma and or former Minister Gigaba regarding your reinstatement?
None.
You didn't say that in your affidavit.
Eh?
You don't deal with that question in your affidavit.
I do.
Okay.
Can I read it for you and I quote?
Right?
6.4.
All right.
It has been brought to my attention that the Commission is also investigating whether erstwhile President Zuma and or erstwhile Minister Gigaba may have attempted to secure my reinstatement.
Yes.
I emphatically deny having had knowledge of such attempts until such time that I became aware of such allegations during the Commission's proceedings.
All right. I do
So
apologize.
all I
suppose
know
it
is
should
what
have-
other people tell you. I don't know, but I wasn't at those meetings.
I suppose if the cross-reference were to 6.3 and 6.4, then that confusion might not have arisen. So you
Close
deny
quotes.
having any knowledge of such attempts.
Yes.
Did you ever have occasion to meet President Zuma, former President Zuma?
When?
Well, ever.
Hmm?
Ever.
Have I met President Zuma?
Yes. Personally, have you met him?
Yes.
When?
He was there to launch our locomotives in 2014 or 15, I don't know the day.
Is that the only occasion that you met him?
He is officiated on a number of Transnet projects that we delivered out of the market demand strategy. I don't know the dates.
So apart from those, let's call them business or official meetings, have you met him?
No,
Have you had a
not
ca-
about this anyway.
Well, I'm asking you, have you met him? I'm not tying it to a subject.
No, I haven't had any personal meetings with President Zuma. I have not had.
Have you had personal meetings with Mr. Gigaba?
Yes, I've had a meeting with Mr. Kigaba,
When was that?
a personal meeting.
I beg your pardon?
I'm saying I've had a meeting with Mr. Kigaba.
Yes.
It was after my reinstatement at Transnet. He asked to meet with me, and I met with him.
And what did you meet him about?
He wanted me to assure them that I would give support to the Group Chief Executive of Transnet, Mr. Molefe, and make sure that I supported him so that the company can succeed.
And when would that meeting have been?
Sometime in 2011, probably around April or May of 2011, after I'd been reinstated.
Was that within his seeking that assurance from you? Was that within the context of the fact that you had previously also applied
That's
for
correct.
appointment to that position
That's
that
correct.
Mr. Mlefe was now occupying?
Yes.
But that would have been around about the time of Mr. Malefe's appointment.
After Mr. Molefe had been
After.
appointed, yeah.
And you also applied for that position, as I understand.
I had applied for it in 2009.
But you confirmed that you applied for it at this time
Yes.
as well. Now, let's deal then with Mr. Gigaba. We know that he is appointed as the new minister on the 1st of November, and he then appoints a new board of directors with Mr. Mkonazi as the chairperson, correct?
Yes.
Now, you would have seen that at the first meeting that Mr. Mkonazi has with Mr. Gigaba, Mr. Gigaba tells him, at least according to Mr. Mkonazi, that the fairness of your dismissal should be reviewed. Did you know anything about that and the stance of Mr. Gigaba?
No, I was not at that meeting. Chair, maybe just a bit of context, which I don't know whether Mr. Mybeck knows or doesn't know. I was dismissed at a particular date, as he said. I appealed that dismissal. When I appealed that dismissal,
I know you use in your affidavit the term appealed as you do now,
yes,
and that's understandable because you are not a lawyer.
that's correct.
But it's technically it's called you referred an unfair dismissal dispute to the bargaining council.
That's correct.
It's not an appeal, but you institute proceedings to challenge your dismissal. So I'm just making that because I saw in your affidavit you use that term, but I know what you mean.
No, thank you for schooling me, Chairperson. You know these matters much more than many of us. Yeah, quite correct. But I think as a result of my referral of the unfair dismissal to the Transnet Bargaining Council, there was a meeting at the Bargaining Council where, as the appellant, whatever name you want to give,
It's called applicant. Yeah.
Applicant, yes.
Transnet or TFR would be respondent. Yeah.
Yes. So as the applicant, I adduced certain arguments around the matter. Then Transnet requested that the matter be adjourned so that an opportunity could be given to Transnet and myself to engage on the matter and see whether or not we could not settle this matter. So when Mkwanazi gets into the arena, he is taking over from that process, where there are discussions between me and Transnet that have been asked that let us discuss this, let us see if we cannot settle this. And I can tell you, Chairperson, I did not want to go back to Transnet in terms of the settlement discussions that we were having. I just wanted to see how much money they could give me to go away.
That's quite interesting.
So
Yeah.
I'm saying that there were discussions that were taking place as a result of that.
But part of what you're saying is, I'm not the one who was pushing to be reinstated. If they gave me money...
No, I said to them, pay me so much, I will leave you in peace.
Yeah, okay.
And you can do your shenanigans without me. Because even the circumstances of my being charged, they knew it had never happened in Transnet before. Where instead of people saying to you, we think there's been a transgression of this nature, how can you resolve it? Auditors in Transnet, they come to management and they say, Manager so-and-so, this is what has happened. Are you aware of it? How do you plan to remedy it? When it came to Gama, people were saying, you've done something, but we won't tell you. We won't tell you what we think you have done. We will tell you when we give you the bundle at the disciplinary. Instead of saying, these are the issues. Or if they tell you, they would give me half. Half is too much, Chair. They would give me a quarter of the information. They would come to me and say, here's the last page of what you signed. Do you remember? Is this your signature? So I was charged in those circumstances where it was clear that there was something else. I was only charged as a consequence of my application for a post as the GCE of Transnet. If I had never applied to be the GCE of Transnet in 2009, I would never have been charged. So, and people were scrapping around, and Chair, there's a succession plan in Transnet. You can go and ask for them in June or September 2008 and say, who was the person that was earmarked to take over from Maria Ramos. You can go and ask them. And maybe they will give you the document. And then the decision not to follow their own succession plan, you can also go and ask them why. I had not been charged at that time. So, Chair, I'm saying there's a lot of context to these things. And sometimes when you hear, I'm being asked, was it Zuma? There's also somewhere where Hogan says that Mantashe as well
Yeah, I think,
said the same things. And you have to ask the question, what was the context? Because I don't think they just woke up one day and they said, oh, okay, it's Gama, it was the SACP, it was the ANC. I don't know. But the actual discussions that I'm being asked about, I was not a party to them. I'm not privy to any presidential discussions with cabinet ministers.
now, Mr. Mybeck had put a certain question, and I'm not sure whether this has answered it. If it hasn't, Mr. Mybeck, you can put the question again.
Yes, no, I don't think it has. I was dealing with the issue of this first discussion between Mr. Makhonazi and Mr. Gigaba. And I'd asked you whether you knew anything about the stance that Mr. Makhonazi said Mr. Gigaba adopted, and that is that the fairness of your dismissal should be reviewed. And as I understand your answer, you say, well, Mr. Makhonazi picked up the new chairperson, there had been preceding negotiations. Did I understand your evidence correctly?
Yes. When I engaged with Makhonazi, he said to me, look, do not entertain these things of us paying you a lot of money to go away. The business is suffering. We would want for you to continue to make a contribution. And because I knew him, I changed my mind. He had been my GCE before. I said to him, yes, I will stay. But let's then discuss how we deal with it. Because his issues were that Transnet, in fact, what he said to me, I think they were within 4 months of going cash negative. He said, look, in 4 months' time, the company is not going to be able to pay salaries for the employees because of what is happening at TFR. I need you to go and fix this thing. I agreed, and that's how we had an issue, a discussion about settlement. And at that time, he then said to me, look, if you agree that you can come back, then we can discuss the reinstatement. I have to go back to my board colleagues to discuss these matters. And then we will have another discussion. That's where we were. So as far as I am concerned, there was that process, Chair, that you described. It's not an appeal. There was that process, and out of that process, then came this discussion that I was having with Makhonazi. Yeah.
If I could go back to the discussion that Makhonazi had with Mr. Gigaba. What Mr. Makhonazi said is that it was clear to him that Mr. Gigaba had some information about your dismissal. He said that he referred to condonation of procurement. He spoke about such things. And what Mr. Mkonazi assumed is that he knew that because, according to Mr. Mkonazi, he assumed that you had been speaking to Mr. Gigaba. You want to comment on that?
No, I had not been speaking to Mr. Gigaba. Remember, you just told me and the chair earlier that Ms. Hogan was the Minister of Public Enterprise. So there's nothing that I would have been discussing with Mr. Gigaba. I did not know that Mr. Gigaba is going to become the Minister of...
Well, this is a discussion that Mr. Mkonazi says he has, and his
Did he
view
give you a
was-
date on when he had that
Well,
discussion?
you see, this is a tricky part of Mr. Mkonazi's evidence. He says it was in October, you'll recall, Chairperson,
End of October.
at the end of October. And he seemed to stand by that. It was put to him by the chairperson that it couldn't have been in October, end of October. It must have been after the 1st of November, because that's we know objectively when Mr. Gigaba was appointed. But if I recall the evidence correctly, Chair, he did indicate that he met with Mr. Gigaba in his capacity as him being the minister.
Yes.
So I think it's more of a date issue than...
Yeah, I think if they did meet before 1 November, it would only have been if Mr. Gigaba had been told that from 1 November he was going to be Minister of Public Enterprises. That's the only thing I can think of. But in the end, whether they met on the 31st of October or early in November, it might not really matter. It's more the content of the discussion that may be important, and the fact that the discussion related to what would be Mr. Gigaba's portfolio from the 1st of November.
Thank you, Chair.
So to give you an answer, it's either end of October or early November, because I think Mr. Gigaba has dealt with that in affidavits. He has not testified yet, and I think that he admits that such a meeting took place, but I think he says it was early November.
Okay.
So the simple proposition is that on Mr. Mkonazi's evidence, Mr. Gigaba knew about your dismissal case, knew about the controversy in relation to the condonation of procurement irregularities, and he, in that context, assumed that you had been speaking to Mr. Gigaba. You say you hadn't done that.
No, as I say, there would have been no reason for me to do so, because I didn't even know that Mr. Gigaba was going to become the Minister of Public Enterprises. But two, this was a very public matter. People wrote theses around this in 2010.
And what Mr. Mkonazi also says is he thought that he assumed that you had spoken to Mr. Gigaba because when you were suspended, you had lobbied many ministers.
It's not true.
That you not lobbied ministers.
I went home and I stayed with my father and I planted tomatoes.
Now I want to deal with the involvement of Mr. Mahlangu. You know, Mr. Mahlangu, he was the advisor to Mr. Gigaba.
Yes.
We are 2 or 3 minutes before 1 o'clock. I don't know whether you want to start or you want to start after 2.
I'm happy to start after lunch.
Yes.
It may be more convenient.
Yes, yes. Okay, let's take the lunch break now. We will resume at 2 o'clock. We adjourn.